Our next speaker, that we're going to kind of move into a slightly different direction. As everybody knows from the schedule, it's a little here and there because all these things really interest me. The question was, how much can a bad guy do here in the States without breaking any laws? My friend Jake said, oh, I can do WMD from a Costco. Welcome, Jake, showing us how to WMD from Costco.
Yeah. D's, plural, devices, plural.
Plural. Now, his affiliation, I'm not allowed to say. He may or may not choose.
We'll go with one of the semi-legit ones.
As long as it's semi-legitimate.
The one you yesterday, the large software manufacturer.
There we go. Hopefully this will be fun keeping.
Oh, I love. We get version 0.1.
You're welcome. Let's see here.
Not even a 0.8, huh?
You better be nice to the Somalis now.
Yeah, it's
Why?
empty around here.
Because they're on a budget.
That's because we all use Pirate Bay. Don't worry.
Yeah, but
about
isn't this landlocked? They can't drive a pirate boat up here, can they?
Whatever. They're driving the taxi cabs through a lot of cities.
This is a river. This connects. You can get up to the Appalachians and to Mississippi and to Minnesota.
So they can get here then.
If you get to Mississippi,
Oh,
then
well
you
then,
can-
maybe I'll change my wording. Yeah, actually, Tim's talk gave a great intro for some of this stuff because I'm not talking about the how, or rather, I'm not talking about the why, the motivation. I'm talking about the how. But there's a lot of great. I really enjoyed Tim's talk. I'm Jake. One of the many titles I use, Internet Detective. I've been doing security, physical and digital security for way too fucking long. Yeah.
You got to speak up.
Well, fine then. I will.
Deaf.
I know you are.
Then speak up, please.
All right.
Thank you.
Affiliated with the Internet Detective Agency, Black Lodge Research, the hackerspace up in Redmond, Washington. SecBlock, Guerrilla Research and Development, one of the three founders of both of those orgs. On staff at DEF CON, et cetera, et cetera. firstperiodlast@gmail.com is how you reach me. I know the spelling of my last name is a little difficult. It's not very common. The concept, after Wynn approached me, I want to terrorize a large city, but I don't have that kind of international funding. It doesn't seem too bad of an issue. You guys recognize the hierarchy of needs? Yeah? You want to flip it on its ass. There's a whole bunch of points. I used one of the frameworks that's out there. Wikipedia's also got a great freaking article on it. Is the Carver methodology, Carver plus chaos, because you have the accumulative effect of Carver afterwards. I don't have slides on that, but if you're not familiar, I'd strongly recommend looking into it. The entire talk is considerably longer than an hour. I took some of the highlights, best ofs, the cheap shit that you can do a lot of destructive damage with. Electricity, and because of that, water, health and safety, and trust of the same emergency services that are going to try and take care of you in the event of emergencies, and telecommunication, how dependent we are on all of the devices in all of our pockets and tablets and the rest of it. Oh, did I lose it again? There we go. Power's the first one up. So, and of course, converting my slide is always fun. The grid. You have generation, all the plants that are pumping high voltage. You have transmission lines to distribute it to where it needs to go, and then you have distribution, which is the considerably less voltage going out to your homes and everything else. The big point is the gigantic weak link is in between generation and transmission, from what I found. This is a phase attenuating voltage regulation transformer. A lot of people in the industry, in the energy industry, call it a pervert or povert, but pervert works. Turning that into this. This was a photo from actually mechanical defect that caused this gigantic failure. This was in Asia, I believe. Knocked out power for, I guess, the equivalent of a state, the physical size of a state that we have here in the U.S. For 2 to 3 weeks, I believe. It's a kind of, for scale, for size, you can see here's a 5-foot-something man, you know, the size of a small house. Gigantic oil tank on top, which is used for the, sorry?
I see they build firewalls now.
Yeah, they're not a deterrent for attack. It's just in the event of damage or burning for one, so that it does not damage the other. Now this is from, these are smaller perverts, and I'm going to use pervert instead of povert because I think it's fucking hilarious. These are smaller ones that are used, you can tell by the nationalities, not necessarily U.S. guys. This is Asia. Great identifier is these grounding poles, so you can use this as a spot if you're going to choose an attack. We're going to choose a target for attack. It's really easy to identify these things, especially if you're going to not necessarily attack it up close and personal, but from a great distance away. Well, great being the range of an late 1800s rifle, using technology that has been around longer than most modern power distribution to take out that exact same network. These gigantic tanks on top is an oil reservoir, and I'll get into that in a second, I guess. There's also, from the perverts, there's circuit breakers, so in the event of failure, these will fire. That's an older design. It's driven by oil, or rather the insulator is oil. There's a modern design, these here. It's getting the exact same job accomplished in a much smaller amount of space. These are not filled with oil. They're filled with a inert gas. Sorry. The point being, as an insulator, the amount of voltage going through these things, the circuit breaker has to pop. If that was to happen in an open air environment, they would explode. This thing would shoot up, 50 feet in the air. There'd be massive damage. The problem being is that that's just a tiny little thin piece of metal protecting that inert gas storage. Same as you have mild steel protecting the oil reservoir for the circuit breakers. So if those were to be damaged by your typical terrorist, you could take out. That's a 22. I would assume at the range we're talking maybe a 22-250, but a small caliber rifle with a can. You could make them out of a whatever. I won't get into silencer design, but those are a lot more easily damaged from a moderate distance than the older style circuit breaker.
Miners in West Virginia some years ago did this for real. They shot out transformers with their rifles, and they could get them to explode, and they were in groups of 4, and they could take out all 4 of them. So we've actually had real-world demonstration of this.
There's actually several last year, October last year, in Los Angeles, or I guess San Francisco area, where there was, I guess FBI is considering it a trial run attack, where a group that has not been identified, they figured it was 2 to 4 people with small caliber weapons firing hundreds of rounds. I don't know, I don't have the forensic information on that, but they took out a significantly smaller substation, taking out power for 2 to 3 days, I believe, and in addition to that, also cut a section of fiber optic cable, which damaged AT&T backhaul communications for, I believe, that same amount of time, a little under a week. On the right, we have, it's a Mosin Nagant from late 1800s, 7.62x54R with a can, which is more than enough that you'll need to penetrate one of those oil tanks. Same thing with the. Actually, I'm going to roll back here because I wanted to.
Have you done any training of your special forces on this?
I'm sorry?
Have you done any training of your special forces on where to shoot at the pair?
Well, let's cover that right now.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to throw in an extra slide, and I think I will, but on the pervert, these are pervert, yes. On the pervert, your typical pervert. You can tell by his mustache. You have a gigantic oil reservoir, and on the right behind these fans, it's all galvanized steel for the majority of it, are a series of radiators. So I don't know if there's a ton of photos online if you look for this style design. They all look very similar. Sometimes the oil tank is off to the side. In most cases, it's above because they're letting gravity do the work for them. You could puncture a hole at the bottom of the base of the oil reservoir, one at the top, so it evacuates the oil more quickly. And punching a hole right near the bottom of the radiator, you can shoot through the fan. It is just galvanized. There's no additional hardening around this. This is in much more of a secure location because you're going to have to basically be on, I believe this is the photo with the road. There's a interstate or a highway, so you're going to be coming at it from a considerably longer distance. The majority of these are in isolated places. They're not near a major city. They're near much considerably closer to power generation. When I first was looking at this as an analysis point, I focused more on the Pacific Northwest. So these are off in woodland areas. There's not a lot of people. There's a minimum crew of 4 or 5 constantly on staff. These buildings are manned, power generation, 24/7 in case shit blows up. But all you would need to do is remove the fluid necessary to cool these devices. They will overheat and, explode. The problem is that it's the size, you can see by that scale photo, it's the size of a small house and it weighs a considerable amount of, they are very, very difficult to drop in a replacement. And in most, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, there are not very many replacements on hand.
Where are they made?
Where are they made?
It's all made in China, aren't they?
Yes, yes. There's a couple of Chinese sites where you can buy a considerably smaller one if you wanted to set up like a mini power grid. If you were
a test range.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. If you wanted to do some testing. So you take out one, they're going to need, if they were working around the clock and had all the equipment on hand, 2 days to replace, and then they have no replacement. These things need to be brought in on a gigantic carrier. They're not easily replaced, but it is a gigantic. Sorry, I get frustrated when I see how poorly we secure our infrastructure. That's physical attack.
Well,
It's sorry.
I misunderstood. I thought it
No,
was
any power infrastructure. They're all. We use these here. The older circuit design is much more prevalent in other countries, not North America, because of the cheapness of the design. These modern ones have been replaced because they're a lot cheaper to manufacture, and they can. We're talking what, a 30-year replacement life cycle. But again, Pacific Northwest, the majority of the infrastructure, the hardware infrastructure, is greater than 50 years old. 50 to 60 plus.
These are Bellingham, Burlington.
It would be, yeah, the power administration's up there. In that case, there is a single pervert that is driving the majority of the Pacific Northwest grid in northern Washington. So they have one and a backup. So you take out one, wait for them to replace it with backup, take that out, and they're.
Jake, how many of these are around the U.S.? Do you have any clue?
That I don't have any figures on. Yeah.
You always ask Dr. Roxy, you might have to figure it out.
I'd be really, that's another thing I'm actually going to look up when. That's a very good point.
Jake, what, 1 or 2 manufacture of these worldwide, or?
That, again, I don't know.
So,
Are the designs themselves regulated by government?
No, I believe it's all private industry. Now, there's some very basic stamps going into these. There's not a lot to them in a general sense. Every manufacturer has their own secret sauce, right? But they all function on the same basic principle.
Right, but and I know you're going to get to this probably, but the hardening or the controls that you would see needing to be put in place, there's no government agency that would actually enforce those being put in place? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Come on to DHS.
well, I'll get to how much I don't like NERC SIP in a minute,
Or a
but
report from DHS, where they released an ABD system, which could replace within 24 hours. Not to be.
now if they had one,
They are testing,
okay.
but it
It's good to
seems
know.
to be some kind of government responsibility
So-
to try to.
What you would find is the test labs are available, and if you would consider volunteering for the ICSJWG, I don't know if anyone else in the room would recommend you, but I would personally recommend you to the head of research, Dr. Tim Roxy, in about 10 minutes after you finish your presentation.
Okay.
So you can send it to him and see what Tim thinks.
Yeah.
If you end up in
I'm
custody,
always happy to talk about bad ideas.
if you end up in custody, it's nothing to do with me.
Yeah, no, I'll use Wynn's name. I'll use Wynn's name. I'm going to start publishing my new talks under your name now, Wynn.
How many of them would you have to take out to have a real impact?
So in the scenario of taking out power for the greater Seattle area, one device, and then 48-hour minimum 48-hour.
But what would the knock-ons on the grid be? Because you'd be looking at phase variance. and-
Absolutely.
There's a leak wiki about the Brazilian power grid going down, and obviously no one from the US could comment on it once the rules said it's still secret. But and effectively a phase difference of a couple of milliseconds before you took out there.
Yeah, the interties regulate that. So Pacific Northwest, I guess I could roll back. I should start throwing the same slides,
Try letter P, see if it just does it without having to go through it.
maybe.
And the other side too, though, is look at the loading of the grid.
You make a PP in front of
Data
everyone.
connections.
Yeah, there we go.
Keyboard shortcuts. Secret change.
So I'm sorry, where was the question that I was going to get to? That was the taking one out. There's for this section of northern Washington, we're talking one pervert. One for the much larger greater Seattle area.
Most people may know this, but for those who don't, Texas is isolated from the other 47.
Well, I'm not
They
surprised.
do not play well with others. They're very separate.
That does not surprise me.
It is true.
So you just need to get a couple Texans with a late 1800s rifle.
Well, I actually talked to the guy who runs that. He was one of my SAMS classes. They have 4 simultaneous hot sites that are run concurrently toward managing all of this in terms of monitoring everything and trying to look at that infrastructure. It's pretty significant. I would think you'd work your way around Texas. That's a hard target, from what I understand, because they got it all under one roof.
Especially if you wanted to do a small man
Yeah, they
group
feel
of
that.
yeah, if you want to focus on a small group, 4 or 5 guys that are committing gigantic, impactful acts of terrorism, definitely don't go where they all have guns. Yeah, that's a very good point. Or come up with some sort of a chemical deterrent, so you can gas them before you. Sorry?
Beer. It's just throw lots of beer in them.
Carrying around a lot of guns.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, if you're able to kill off one of them, you don't even need to spend the $50 a rifle plus ammo, you can just take theirs.
So concentrate on
That's-
Washington and Colorado, where everybody's a little slower and.
Well, Colorado, they also have a bunch of weapons. There's just less people.
Far
Washington,
out, man.
Oh, that's right, they legalized the weed.
because they pay
Forgot
the
about
legal
that.
expenses of anyone who shoots you with due cause.
Anyway,
The intertie that you were talking about. So responsiveness, when that goes down, there is about 25% based on publicly available information I've been able to find comes from coal power from Montana, Colorado area. So the intertie is just it's a gauge that will determine the load on each side of the intertie, and if it's dropping, it's going to increase the load that's coming from the other energy supplier.
there are some key junctures that, if you time it right, will cascade pretty significantly.
Inside most of these larger stations, there is the intertie box where that gauge exists, and you can watch it. It's pretty much 50-50, but you can see minute fluctuations in it. It's usually there's no big manufacturer. The intertie device there is, but the box for regulation and tying in with the existing network is all hand-tailored. Most of which that I've seen, it's just a gigantic silver box at the top or bottom of a rack and has one button on it that says intertie off or intertie power off. So if you're able to compromise the security of the building, find the box and physically push the button. It's a single button to destroy the intertie. So if the intertie's down, power's down, there's no way to get the power back on without a cold start.
But in terms of defense,
So there'd be no internet.
there'd be nothing. But
Well, I got a bunch of different solutions for no
in
internet.
terms of defense, all of your attacks rely on at least 2 shots.
Mhm.
So in terms of reactional network and real-time reporting, you've just defined a requirement. Therefore, they need to monitor the sound of a shot.
Oh, that's why I tried to find as many photos of non-scary black rifles. So I'm using late 1800s rifles with a cheap-ass can on them, a suppressor. Yeah. That way you're hearing much less report, if any. With a 22 to take out the modern circuit breakers, all you're going to hear is the impact on that weak steel or
There's
aluminum.
going to be monitors for the oil
Hmm?
leak, so we need to be able to react to that a lot faster.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, if you're going to take a series of circuit breakers down, we're talking 50, 60 shots,
The point
possibly.
I'm making, which is probably not obvious, is the Managed Instant Lightweight Exchange Program has real-time capabilities on monitoring,
Mhm.
but no one's probably thought of a need till this time.
That's a very good point.
But the other thing in the reconnaissance phase, what you're going to do is you're going to introduce spurious noise at the same volume and the same frequency range.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be boy who cried wolf, eventually you're going to shut the thing down thinking it's causing
Oh,
unnecessary
yeah.
problems. Then
Yeah,
you do your
I could
thing.
set up a PA with a microcontroller and just make it sound report. Yeah, hang it from a
Fly
tree.
your UAV with a little
But in terms of wire
Yeah.
monitor,
yeah.
if it's an oil monitor, pressure monitor, it needs to be reported in real time.
Well, and that's just another system of sensors that are going to be tied into SCADA
Yeah.
or ICS, ICN, whatever, which gets me actually to my digital side. How many people are familiar with the Distributed Network Protocol, V3?
The language is SCADA.
Yes, it is.
We have a firewall to go between 24 volt and the network if anyone needs it.
Absolutely. That's a very, very good point.
It's Brit Tech, it's new, and it's come out of kinetics form.
Yeah?
Research course.
Really? I want to talk more about this afterwards.
We'll
That's
talk later.
yeah. And right before I get redacted. Yeah, I'm sure. Black bag. In April last year, 2 people that are not security researchers, they are developers, found several series of issues with the protocol and implementation of the protocol, finding that with some additional research after they found it, trying to prove against their implementation of software using DMP3 V3. They were not vulnerable, but the majority, and in this case, 80–90% of the majority of vendors are vulnerable. This is I'll bring up an example in a second. It took 3–4 months after they reported, and in April when they first found this issue, they reported it to ICS CERT. It took them 3 to 4 months to actually release a public advisory.
So faster than Target.
Yes, faster than Target.
Okay.
Yes, whether or not anything has been done about it, I know that a series of vendors have released patches to their systems. Whether or not those are being implemented, I'll get to that. This is the Gauntlet, I believe. Yes. Sorry?
In terms of testing, did they like do full fuzz testing of the protocol?
No.
Or were
They found it while trying to implement DMP3 with their application.
they very specific attacks? Then there's probably a lot more.
Well, it was an issue that is it's specific as most of these IP-based vulnerabilities. It's also can be accomplished locally. So if you have serial access or dial-up IP access to these devices or the sensor net, that you can compromise it the same way, with the compromise to the Gauntlet server causing it to become unresponsive until a physical power cycle. It has to reinitialize the stack, I believe. not just sensor stack, but also network stack. Yes. There's also a bunch of other ways to compromise users' response to the sensor feedback that they're getting and I guess I should point out, these sensors are placed on these critical assets, so the intertie, or the variety of 100+ different sensors that are always in a power station, reporting up to dial-up gateway and then a server, so a user that's out in the field or someone in headquarters can see on the big board current state of the power network. Sorry?
Do you know anything about those IP stacks? I mean, are they paying a death safe and stuff? Or?
No, typically they're old tech.
Yeah.
Typically it's MT4 or something similar.
You can also go after the dial-up so that you can figure out what the number is, and you just create a denial of service attack, like just leaving that line busy.
Absolutely.
So this thing's trying to phone in its panic, and it's always
Absolutely. Pre implementation of these systems. So IP is covered by NERC. All the sensor networks that are connected to an IPv4 gateway is covered by NERC. Everything that's still on serial and dial-up or IP afterwards, but serial connectivity is not at all. I have no idea why, but I know that a lot of power companies have gone back to the previous implementations of their sensor network because they no longer have to comply with NERC SIP. So we have people that are rolling back implementations, making them more vulnerable to attack, as opposed to getting with the program. Obviously, cost is a big driver. I know that a lot of them as well in the Pacific Northwest go through an elaborate series of exceptions because, as with all of these federal programs, there's an exception process that we also deal with it in the corporate world.
Well, before you could go on to more WMD craziness, is this a global system? I mean, is this in Sweden?
No, this is per site. I mean, you could implement this.
No, I'm saying the DNP3.
Yeah, the protocol is vulnerable.
There's about 4 or 5 sets of protocol.
But I mean, they're used all around the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that the Siemens? Siemens code?
Siemens also has an implementation of DNP3. It's standardized, but it's not regulated, so everyone can come up with their own special sauce for it.
Okay. Otherwise, I think it's just as you said.
But I mean, what I was alluding to, I'll tell you about it anyway. So just in the broadest terms, we've got the ability to, for example, on a wellhead, have 6 well-known controls. One might be pump on, one might be pump off, 4 of them might be monitors of flow and so on. So the question becomes, when your control system, and if you go all the way down as far as a wellhead, that's about as far down as you can go. When your control system becomes compromised, you've got nothing. So the trick with some of the malware has been to con the operators that their valves and things are flowing. So you totally build a lead defense, and the main players in the field, Industrial Defender are well known. So I would encourage you to have a look at the Industrial Defender website if you want more detail. They've got some very good expertise there. But one of the things and challenges has been, until recently, there hasn't been the tech to inspect these command sets on the serial interfaces. So literally, we've got a product range that I'm looking at now to put out and extend. So it's already deployed in the Gulf on wellheads, and we specialise in oil and gas, Nigerian Delta, places like that, and we're looking for new applications. So it's new tech, leading edge technology. It needs to be deployed for defence in depth, and I'm sure you'll show us more of why.
Well, and
What I was talking about when I was describing our exercise in the scale was the intrusion into this code, this area.
Yeah.
Now, were you going over IP into those, or were you going over dial-up?
Doesn't matter, does it?
all 3 are vulnerable. IP, dial-up.
Just with different vectors.
Well, IP, dial-up, and serial, so
It's
local.
even worse now because some
Serial.
of them are using Wi-Fi.
There's an entire talk there that could just be done around sensors and attacks, or hardening thoughts on just the sensor network.
To step back, I'll introduce you to Dr. Oxy, who's the Chief Scientific Advisor for ICS-JWG. His day job is in NERC, and I think you can add some extreme value. and you can also act as an interface to the IT security community, because what you'll find is the guy that I know, he installed the diesels at Fukushima, the Japanese nuclear plant,
Yes.
and he was willing to go back out there before they went pop. But he's a guy that I've seen do an install covered in diesel, head to toe. Brit, ex-naval petty officer, does ships, diesels, anything. And he doesn't care about the IT systems, he just wants this thing to work. And the SCADA challenge is the ways of thinking. These guys will put stuff in the ground, and you said 50 years? I've met British Rail, they say 25 years. They do not care about the IT side at all. They really don't, and it's chalk and cheese. And this is the cultural barrier that we have to learn to bridge as IT people in order to communicate and speak their language.
Yeah, we have systems that are being implemented on 50, 60 plus year old hardware, which is designed for specific intent to take a lick and keep on ticking against, bombs and all sorts of attack that are then being adapted to at least function from a reporting or management standpoint, mostly reporting, in some cases management. Reporting and alerting, I guess.
Some of these are positioned a little bit better because even back in the mid-90s, when I worked for one of those Pacific Northwest power companies, we actually had dark fiber between every substation. Because what we've done is we've leased the right of way to fiber infrastructure companies and said, yeah, you can string all the fiber you want, you just have to give us X number of pairs. So we actually had
So private fiber
very
interties.
good private closed control system between all of those.
Which, as long as you have access to any part of that line, my favorite attack
Right,
for fiber is a pair of hedge clippers.
Yeah.
So in Sweden, some of these runs are 2,000 kilometres long, and a friend of mine installed them. So,
But what we noticed is the design of the code could be very different. It's old, it's different, it's not easy to compromise.
Well,
Even if you get into that.
Security throughout
and
the
understand
lesson.
it,
I love that.
If you're security.
Trademark lessons.
All right.
18-inch floppy drive.
Well,
oh my God,
that's one
which
thing that
submarine did you
I
get
did
that
look
out
at.
of?
So the keys are being signed between the device and headquarters where the Gauntlet Master MC is. And then the remote users have a key issued to them so that when they connect, they show up on an authenticated list. It's mostly public-private from what I've seen. All you would need to do, you can see actually in this photo, the OS that they're displaying the Gauntlet program on is a Windows XP box. So pick your poison. Drive-by malware.
Again, kernel lockdown is recommended.
Yeah. You need to have a hardened system
Kernel lockdown.
if you're going to have remote people running around with laptops in potentially an unlocked truck where they might be doing line work and the truck's just there, steal a bag, you already have access. Or, we need more than just a tough book, so it can do more than just being kicked around, have coffee spilt on it. It actually needs to be hardened from a security standpoint. With a lot of talks that myself and my friends do, we always try and come up with a new buzzword for each talk, and I would recommend all of you to do the same so that we can absolutely flood the already gigantic amount of buzzwords that we have in security with ones that we want, as opposed to using cyber blank for everything. This one's FUD Packer, because it's fucking hilarious. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt packed into as much as you possibly can. Try and consolidate and pack in as much FUD as possible.
At least 3 FUDs per slide.
As much. Well, no, but I mean the implementation of FUD packing I'll get into in a second. It's a good question. It's a good question. I'll get back to you on that. One of the things that I wanted to look at is you can have all of these emergency services organizations that are there to protect public health and safety. But if the public doesn't trust the people that are there to help them, it's become useless. If people are going to run away from cops because they have no trust in cops, or they're going to run away from a fireman because of we could go into scenarios if we want. I only have the hour. So I'm happy to go on to all sorts of terrible, terrible ideas I have with the longer talk. One of the big ones that I really enjoy is disinformation via radio broadcast, FM or AM radio.
War of the Worlds.
Sorry?
War of the Worlds.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a great example. You could do the exact same attack and people will believe it if it sounds authentic. Emergency alert system, Amber Alert, or whatever the other small one is. Yeah, absolutely. Nuclear attack, or Chinese zombies have invaded and they're eating children, or whatever. I mean, it doesn't. You can actually, since every radio station broadcasts an emergency alert test, you can relatively cheaply and easily take a sample of that if they don't already have templates. They may already have pre-recorded templates that you can.
There's one that happened yesterday.
Yeah?
Somebody managed to convince CNN and everybody else that there was a shooting at the University of Oklahoma. Last I saw that, and the university
delightful.
sent out shutdown notices and everything. And then last news reports I saw last night before I went to bed was sheriffs coming out and going, yeah, we have no idea what happened.
That's a great break in policy that you can leverage against your
There was no
attack.
shootings. There was no reports of shootings.
It was a test.
Well, absolutely. People will respond with their current methodology if the threat or potential of threat exists.
Is it a bit like you're in the ops room and someone says, oh shit, it's on CNN, we need our perspective by the morning?
Well, yeah, we didn't know about it, but CNN knows about it. Yeah.
Or, I mean, you could even get people desensitized to that, so that when there really is a shooting,
Mhm.
To shout
costs
like,
more
Absolutely.
damage because they're
Absolutely.
price war.
Yep. Then there's complete public distrust in all of the emergency services, or at least the notification for the public of the emergency service.
April 1st.
Yeah, it's perpetual April Fools, except April Terror, I guess. I don't know what the. I'll come up with another buzzword for that one too. That's April Fudpacking. April Fudpacking first, or yeah.
April 2.
There's a great talk that was at 30C3 Chaos Communication Congress late last year on NewsTweak, and I'll cover that in a moment. It's a Wi-Fi hotspot that will grab onto any public Wi-Fi and using layer 2 ARP redirection, fill in a bunch of, actually very similar to the device that Win was talking about, your privacy guard. Was it, Win, what was the name of that?
Oh,
The app blocker? Ad trap. It does the exact opposite of that, and a remote user can, once it's installed, actually I'll get to that in, okay, we'll do this and then roll back. There's not a lot of great photos of the device itself, but they just put it into existing bare metal plugs for an accessory device, allowing power pass through because it's an embedded system, very low power.
You can, funny?
Yeah.
Our serious organised crime agency, they needed a power adapter. Oh, there's one. Took it out of a box, an evidence box, and a built-in FM transmitter. They plugged their own office.
Really? Really?
Luckily, they found it on one of their own swings.
Well, and this implementation is large and obvious. The system contained inside of it is not necessary for the size of the box. It's maybe the size of a deck of cards, maybe. And yeah, of course, you can see the implementation of it. Yeah, it's Beijing to invest in U.S. Army, because that's always fun. Oh, and
You don't like the kilo.
this is a radio transmitter that you can buy a variety of them from China. They even go down to 100 milliwatt, but the price range for half a watt up to 1,000 watt, you're talking $70 to $1,700. Still very affordable. RDS for display. Anybody still listen to FM radio here? Okay, so in your vehicle, it will also tell you station identification information if you're browsing. That's what RDS is. Those modules are about $60. So if the emergency alert system kicks off, you can also implement the text equivalent string of whatever's going on or whatever you want them to believe is occurring. And according from the FCC, between 100 and 1,000 watts, you're talking a coverage of a service area between 3.5 to a little under 9 miles. That's pretty effective area,
So
especially if you.
boost that.
Yeah, they this same manufacturer that makes these also make an adapter board that you need much lower power output because it does all the work for you, and it goes up to like 500 watt, 600 watt, and it's about
So you make it
about
like
$600.
a normal charger.
Yeah, yeah, and all of these have standard audio 3.5 million.
Shot fire, you can tell the city they're under.
Whatever you want. We could spend
Missiles
hours going over potential
Yeah.
potential attack scenarios. Pick the latest fear and go with that.
-10 outside, snow.
Or it's 90 degrees, or there's a heat wave coming, or there's a gigantic tsunami. We could get back into sensor networks and trigger off the alarms that are, handling all the tsunami response for people that live on the coast. That was one of my potential attack scenarios. I love that. Let's see here. Oh, actually, before I get into noise generators, with internet-wide scanning and a lot of, you guys would think, we probably patch the majority of our home networking equipment. The average user has no concept of this. So when vulnerabilities get released for home routers, as there was 3 or 4 that come to mind in the last 2 months, you could scan, for instance, the entire internet looking for the high-end communication port that's open, and see, also the majority of these are remote code executions. You could do these from whatever stolen credit card and cloud instance you purchased. You could install, and he's open sourced that software. It's also not that complicated at all for even a low to moderate user, or a low to moderate security professional to implement.
As a war scenario, now that multicast has been embedded into IPv6, now that some of the networks are IPv6 and zero conf is frightening, so it will turn itself onto v6 by default, presumably you could address a statewide set of routers at one go.
Absolutely.
One
Absolutely.
packet, bang.
Oh, and with IPv6, IPv4 encapsulation, you can do the same attack that you would hear with an IPv4 system and let the rest of the hardware do the work for you. And so by the time it actually ends up hitting the home user, IPv4 or IPv6. Oh yeah, home user, yeah, bracket S, bracket. Absolutely. Taking this and say you upload code, so now you have remote command and injection capability for all of the modern news sites that everyone's browsing before they go to work, while they're on their way.
And the best bit, no one's going to track it if it's in v6 if they're not looking.
Absolutely. Well, and not to mention monitoring capability for v6 is limited at best. Let's go with that.
The
I think that wins with the evil laugh of the day.
attacks that Costco already conducts.
Yeah. Well, and there's a variety of home routers that you can purchase and then sell. It'll spin up an additional access point for free that's throttled, and you can inject ads to get revenue for yourself based on that. Doing the exact same thing, except obviously packing in as much FUD as you can. Yeah.
So we could have a FUD channel.
Yeah, or channels, yes.
So it's like Apple Radio.
Give a variety of creative writers access to it, and they could come up with their new stories each week. And actually, if you really wanted to go deep on that, just alter the stories that are being displayed with your information as opposed to brand new stories that are so shocking that no one would believe it to begin
And
with.
dynamic DNS as well, so it keeps reconfiguring the network every second.
Well, absolutely. I could do a series of talks, and I'm probably not even the best person for that by far, for just the home router-based vulnerabilities and all of the attack possibilities that exist with
lots of
those.
control systems because they'll be sitting in the home as well with their IP.
Absolutely. The guy that takes his Gauntlet laptop home, and his son also happens to play whatever online game with it.
Game?
Yeah, exactly. They're playing Candy Crush on their phone or on their laptop in the Gauntlet app, also is installed, you happen to compromise because you have direct access to their private network because their home router is compromised and public facing.
Well, you got their whole home network.
Yeah, everyone's home network.
Every
Just
device.
for one vulnerability that came out 3 or 4 months ago, I used a cloud instance and scanned the entire public address space.
With the stolen credit card.
No.
So,
No, because the majority of cloud providers will give you a month of free compute time. So you can give them a gift card, and they'll give you a month for free, and as long as you don't exceed the cost, you can use it for a month. The bandwidth is not that intensive if you're scanning for one port.
yeah.
Then I generated a list of about 75,000 hosts worldwide that were vulnerable to this remote code execution. And based on my sample group, let's call it private internal testing sample group, roughly 60 to 80% are vulnerable to this attack. So we're talking 52,000 public-facing worldwide routers that can be,
That you estimate.
yes, that as an estimate.
And then if we did an SNMP poll on the networks using next step, we could probably.
Well, the best part is you don't need to upload an additional tools. If you were connected to the router directly, you don't need to upload additional tools because most of them are BusyBox installs that have at least basic networking tools and configuration capability.
So we could just do a next step and nick whatever tunnels, networks, connections.
Absolutely.
active credit card connected things they've got and just
Absolutely.
play.
Wow.
Route over to you, SSL strip, take their, sorry?
BGP nightmare.
There's no ASs.
Things down.
What you really need to secure networks is to block ASs, and they're not doing it, and there's no infrastructure to let you, and that's the only way you're going to lock the Chinese out.
Well, everyone. It's not just the Chinese.
Yeah.
If I was, more malicious in implementation than just in creative thought, anyone can do this. The proof of concept script that guy implemented specifically for that vulnerability, you can run out of the box. I could teach my mother to use it with about 10 minutes of training.
If everyone advertised itself as the global route for everything in its area, with BGP, I mean, that would be $53,000.
Yeah.
That would be.
That's a pretty substantial botnet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could shut down the net.
Mhm.
So your one was the size of the UK, wasn't it, Dennis?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Let's get on to noise generators for a moment. This model is sold in the U.S. and is also it's a rebrand from China. It's $2,500.
So do you expect the PLA train on this kit?
Sorry?
Would you expect the PLA to train on this kit?
This or the more cost-effective solutions that anyone can purchase. And of course, you also could purchase this if you wanted to spend way more money than you need to. This is basically full spectrum for communication for a civilian implementation. Obviously, there's of course military applications that are outside of these bands and high and super low and the rest of it. And if you were going to go choose a specific target that's outside of the regular band, this is more of a.
It stops before the
This is more of a. Sorry.
It just stops before the HF spec.
Yes.
To me.
Yes.
Is there a civilian application for these, by the way? A regular?
If you
Problem is
wanted.
they're prohibited by federal law in a lot of cases because they could jam law enforcement or other communications. So Joe Sixpack is not supposed to have them.
Well, and the FCC is a lot better that I've seen in movies at enforcing their own laws than they are in real life.
Yes.
I don't even know if. Sure, they have listening
One of
stations
these,
everywhere.
A
But
similar device at the NATO school in Over Ammergau. And so we would have a classified discussion that would come up. Instructor just walk up, put a little box on the thing, and press the little button.
Yep.
So what that is jams all the cell phones within a 30-meter radius.
Yeah.
So if you forgot to leave your cell phone out, if your cell phone was rooted, it doesn't matter.
as long as there's not a hardware bug system or live recording and it's all wireless transmission, you can create like a poor man's skiff room.
Yep, that's what they did.
Yep. However, this price point is ridiculously high. I would recommend that each of you, if you were ever considering purchasing one, is sorry. This one also is this price is the Chinese price.
No.
Yes, that's without shipping.
So they are using it for their own, and they're just
The rebranded one costs a little over $10,000, I think, and comes with a fancy Pelican case, which is, you know, $300.
So the government will buy.
Yeah. Yep. Why buy one when you can buy two at way more than they need to be cost? More than they need to cost. This is a 3-watt model. It's about $200. I've seen them between $140 and $200 and $300. You get most of the same civilian coverage for communications, and it has an effective range of 30 to 130 feet, all depending on. This is this guy covers all of these bands, and actually, do I have? I'll get into the amplifier in a second. This covers all major communication bands as well as the entire 2.4 gig spectrum, so Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Obviously not. Sorry.
Police channels.
800.
That'd be 800. So a portion of them, yes.
So emergent. I mean, point is response, emergency response system.
If I had the spec on the frequency range, you could compare it to the frequency range that I have for these. And
No, the point
if it's
being
800 meg
this
or
is a
somewhere
potential
in
bad guy. I think you can do a skiff, which is a good guy thing.
Absolutely.
Or you can really fuck with the system, and part of the screw with the system is to screw with the first responders
Absolutely.
in order to make your primary effect worse.
Yep.
You can also use it for
So I know. I'm
counter
trying to avoid
IEDs.
pitching.
Unless the IED is or specifically designed to receive a go or no-go signal from another wireless device, and then when it's interrupted, then triggers,
What
like
is
a
the-
dead man switch style.
What's the legality of these things?
From what I have found from the FCC's documentation, and their public statements are always much more broad and vague than the actual written law. From what I've seen and currently understand, possession is not against the law. The moment that this device would ever potentially, hypothetically speaking, be activated, then there's a violation of federal law.
Civil or criminal?
I believe it's criminal.
Because FCC typically does civil law,
I believe it's
like
criminal.
the one state monitoring
What if
thing.
everybody in your
Nobody
range
can agree on what's really going on. That's why.
If everyone in my effective range consents, I believe it still violates federal law because it can interfere. One of the stipulations is the interferes with emergency, like 911 availability service. So if your cell phone, you have a heart attack when this thing just not related, unless you have a pacemaker and it happens to work wirelessly.
Or you're closing down the George Washington Bridge at the same time.
Yeah.
Just saying. That's illegal.
Sorry?
Yes.
Yes, it's yeah.
Same type of law.
Thank you, G-Mark. Yes, it's illegal even if it's consensual. Yes. Yes.
So, I mean this very seriously.
Yes,
Okay,
it's
if
the
legal to
cellular
own
anal
it,
equivalent.
And you
Yeah.
can't turn it on. Can you bridge that mental gap for me?
In Arizona.
Oh, okay, I'll bridge the
it's
mental
legal
gap.
to
It's a
buy
federal law.
fireworks,
It doesn't
but
need to make
It's illegal
sense.
to fire them off.
Yeah, in Washington, we were, for a long period of time, able to own suppressors, but not actually affix and use them with our weapons. That also applied to law enforcement. You could own a suppressor in the state of Washington up until 3 years ago, but you could not
So I'll have to
fire
look
a
at-
weapon with one
I
attached.
can look at the
Even if you're
for
legally
educational
allowed to.
purposes. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, I'll let you hold it, just don't turn it on. Well, I guess if you turn it on, I don't care, but yeah. I don't care.
Well, you will. Exactly. Put the switch.
Well, I guess no,
Hold
that'd
on.
be an accessory to
Jake
federal.
needs you to come down and push a couple buttons.
I'll take a pass.
You don't even know why,
Good call,
right?
good call.
You get a response time to the West Hampton Police Department.
What?
So,
Go down to the day labor.
If you can't do not touch
Huh?
it, it's
Go down to
probably
the day
legal.
labor line.
do not touch. Well, that's why I have the gigantic warning
4
label
miles.
of comedic intent on it.
$20.
Besides the major cellular bands and covering Wi-Fi, it also covers one of the 2 major band chunks of GPS.
So you bought the most expensive paperweight a man can own.
As far as any Leo is concerned, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, it's just a paper. It's a display item. It's like art. We'll call it art.
you know RenderMan's work, right?
Yes,
All right.
with ATSs,
What?
air traffic control systems.
The air traffic control and then the avionics and comm control and GPS control from plane.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you address that, please?
Well, if you're on the plane,
I did ask him if he was going to test it.
If you're on the plane, you just have to, you would have to find out whatever the either boosted power or
No, but I'm saying,
receiving
out of the
power.
box, will it screw with planes too?
I'm going to say yes, but it warrants further research.
Put in the backyard.
I have not ever turned it on anywhere near anything like that.
Maybe we can get this into the
I don't wanna-
SCADA facility.
I want to be the guy talking about crashing a plane, not the guy that's crashing a plane because I want to show a demo.
This is the same. This is just another cyber DDoS or DOS one way or another in another part of the spectrum. And if I'm a bad guy, that's a nice tool.
Yeah.
Wait, if you're really
I'm
bad,
just thinking though, you would need a lot of GPS antennas primarily are directional. And so you would need a lot of power to overcome an aircraft's GPS antenna.
Like that?
Which is primarily pointed up.
Like
Is
this?
that true? Or I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
antennas enough.
when you buy a puck and you turn it upside down for a GPS, it really doesn't work that well. And you can buy pucks for a laptop to hook up. Now, it's unidirectional.
They let you. I'm freely travel on airplanes, domestic flights all the time with this and even smaller devices. You could set up one on a timer with a microcontroller. How often do flight attendants check each and every pouch? You get a first class ticket, leave it in one of the pouches. It goes off in 3 hours when the next leg of that flight is in the air.
In the bathroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I
Put
would
it
say
in
if
the,
you're on the aircraft, you could probably screw with it.
Yeah.
But if you're on the ground,
that's also that is a test that I'm not willing to implement. So I don't want to be on the plane when I pick one of
Send it
these
off
up.
in a sniffing way.
We did this
Come back,
thing with
go
the
grab
cameras,
something
and
that's
the most
Stick that on the
unlikely
plane.
attack.
That's the most likely way you do it.
System. But
Well,
that was not
it's
the
actually
idea.
dumping
It was
power directly to the
directed
same
at
chips that we all have in our cell phones.
Yeah, so if you
Explosive
get the
copper
cell
wires,
phone
right.
and find
You have the Airbus 3 hubs.
And also there's
Well, it's not secret sauce. Qualcomm publishes the open spec for their communication standard because a lot of phone manufacturers use those Qualcomm chips.
Back 15 years ago. What was his name?
This?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, there's an I/O port.
Yeah, I should have taken a photo with a port. So that I/O port on the back is RS-232. So for scale, and those two connectors are I believe non-reverse, so they're standard polarity SMA connectors. So we're talking a device that's
And with the old
Certainly no more than 6
lines
inches.
and then the 60s.
we're talking a device that is
No, it would be more.
about that size, about that thick.
Get one about this size, you could
If you have one or two
Well,
guys
and
messing with that.
if you want to have a scaled down version of these they have power amps that have a lot smaller end of the output, but 25 watt would be more than enough to swamp a plane. Yeah, you could do a board design
Well,
that would be
that's-
easily flushable.
Why this stuff scares me.
That's the so with this I have an effective range of potential effective range of 300 to 500 feet.
Say that again?
I have a potential effective range of 300 to 500 feet with this.
So you could take an airfield.
If one was so inclined.
There it is.
Yeah, or just put a magnet on the back and stick it on a metal roof, or there's a bunch of different ways that you could. This is a watertight sealed container. You can put it wherever the hell you want. Will it work from underwater?
RF transmissions do not work on.
Yeah, it's
How long's that battery?
You have to be ELF
So,
for really underwater shit.
without my modifications. The standard battery pack that comes in that handheld unit has a battery life of about 2 hours. 2 to 3 hours, depending on environmental conditions and the output of the chip. I'm currently looking at this build right here, minus the laser. This box right here, all parts included, cost about $150 to make. The additional modifications with a larger battery and a panel plate, just additional furniture to make it look sexy. It's going to bump up the cost to about $200 flat.
The government will pay $1,000.
Yeah, I should start to set up a web front end, sell them under Wynn's name.
I got a service disabled veteran-owned small business, team up.
So yeah, we've got a customer for you, so I need to put it on the portfolio.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'll come up with a PayPal account for it. This is an RF to serial transceiver. So that amplifier had an I/O port for command and control and monitoring on it. You can remotely kick embedded or if a well-placed device off remotely with a range of about 6 to 12 kilometers. Runs on DC, and the application for this is damn near limitless. There's so many things that run on serial. Road signs, those emergency alert signs.
So what's actually happening here? I'm not clear.
So you're using, there will be one on each end. So you're sending commands over serial, then onto RF, and all of the devices that pick this up. So you can kick off, say, 80 of them around a city from one location. As you're driving away, it's that cigarette thrown out of the car onto the gas pile scene.
How do you think our wellheads are connected?
Sorry?
How do you think our wellheads are connected?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch of wireless devices, then wireless RF to serial bridges that are used for buried.
So what's actually being transmitted here that's causing the issue, I guess?
So you have one plugged into the amp, and you send the Go, whatever. I haven't looked at
So
the.
the serial is just a comm channel?
Yeah, it's just a comm channel. You're using it to engage your place devices.
I could
Got
set
it.
remote
All right,
devices,
that's comm.
remote control them through this.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think 232 is much comm anymore, I'm sorry.
It sure is. You would be surprised. It's everywhere. Still everywhere.
Okay.
Because it's cheap. You could build your own 100-watt briefcase for $400 to $500. Now this is not for the most part 12 volt. It's 120 volt, but it fits in a briefcase. That's with the Omni antenna. It's a weak antenna. You could probably get a much better coverage with a larger antenna panel pack. So get a deep stack briefcase. You're talking maybe $600, but versus the price point of $2,500 per the same equivalent power output, this is way more cost effective. I also do like the fact that this photo includes the DC to AC adapter, so you can plug it into a vehicle, have a briefcase in the passenger seat. Yeah, I've just covered all of these points, and with that RF transceiver, you can engage as many devices as you place around a large metropolitan area or an attack site remotely. What could possibly go wrong? Having one of these engaged with an RF transceiver and, like I was saying earlier, a magnet on the back of one of these stuck under the emergency service command vehicle, so the fire marshal or the sheriff, they respond to an incident, and then you kick it off so none of his comms work to communicate with the rest of whoever else is engaged with this gigantic fire sale that you're committing across a large attack area. And of course, there's a bunch of applications, and I'd love to discuss everyone's bad ideas. But I mean, it's damn near limitless.
Rather than attacking the frequency they're using, what about side tagging attacks to knock out the kid because you're close to it? You know, we've got a mobile phone we're not using.
You're talking about overpowering locally? Absolutely. If you're able to knock out on a larger radius with this connectivity to the tower, you could obviously use a femto or microcell implementation that has enough power to break through this in a local implementation, then a hardline back to route calls and do all the rest of your man-in-the-middle attacks.
There's a countermeasure to the department's budget.
Sorry?
Countermeasure.
This is like the HBO from '85. You remember the HBO? It's the same sort of stuff that is now tiny.
If it was a high enough power output, yeah, you could overwhelm.
You build a directional antenna that's kind of sweep like this.
Jake, is the overload factor still 6 dB in voltage terms, or 3 dB in power, or what is it?
Just about. Yeah.
I just have to be a little bit over each one, right, in order to take over?
It's whatever the manufacturer's software implementation to drive in the hardware is, but yeah, it's about that range.
Okay.
Even with standing next to a tower, because right next to a tower, you actually could have minimized signal versus, because they're directional, they're not omni, right?
When I was reading this, Lars, back with Manuel Wick, we were talking back 15, 18 years ago about her VMP with a large scale. But now, with the world having been migrated to
sensor bars
control
on everyone's
systems
face.
for everything. And okay, there's my drone, there's my thing, but everything else is happening down here. Now that it's all completely comm-based, the concept of EMP HERF, unless you're trying to take out a power grid, which requires an amazing amount of power, this suddenly becomes a hell of a lot more efficient way to do it.
Yes. And you
Absolutely.
have directed energy weapons, weaponized within the U.S. military.
Yeah, we spent a boatload of money on it, and that's great for, but this is, for a poor man's thing, it doesn't mean that we have to go the manual wick, what I was saying 15 years ago.
Also,
Suddenly this is easier.
the preventative measure of saying we can just ban this stuff obviously doesn't work. And with just command and control for the RF transceivers, they're also implemented in completely legitimate applications and are not regulated.
Let me ask you a question. I remember back in the Tempest days, and you're old enough to remember that. Tempest was illegal and all that in order to do all the stuff, but we did it anyway, whatever. And there was some companies up and around DC area that specialized in selling Tempest equipment. So I did a look-see while I was consulting to Hughes, and they were selling like 30,000 of these things a year. I was trying to figure out where the hell are they all
The
going?
modern equivalent is...
Wait, hold on a sec. So these, do you have any clue what the sales figures are?
That I don't know. I know that China's always well stocked from any of the variety of distributors.
All right, so you're going to find out by tomorrow how many.
I could find out here after the talk.
I mean,
Whatever published sales
you know what
figures they
I'm
have,
saying?
if they publish any.
Are there 3 being sold, 300 to hackers, or 30,000 to holy shit, who?
So,
I'm sorry, Dave. I just wanted to
yeah,
finish.
no, that's good. Faraday bags seem to be something that you ought to be using routinely.
Yeah, didn't they solve the issue instead of buying Tempest or a Faraday cage on the box? Didn't they just build a command center that's protected?
There's a whole.
So that way you can buy off-the-shelf hardware and stuff it in.
That's a whole different discussion we can get into. Tempest stuff is all different.
Yeah, and, sorry.
If you jam, well, you're sending out a signal, how easy is it to detect the signal and pinpoint it? In other words, how easy is it to get to you and to take you out?
Fairly easy.
Oh, okay.
Fairly easy. I mean, it's constantly generating signal. It's not like a Wi-Fi intruder that could do bursting.
Triangulate too.
But yeah, absolutely. If you're not able to talk to the person that's also going for this gear, and you're trying to talk over ham or FRS or cells or whatever, and none of that's working, you're going to have to set up gear, run over to the other guy, and compare notes, or have a hard line.
One of the original things when we were talking, and we talked about a lot of this in the early days and over in Sweden, was if you're going to do a directed energy weapon, HERF, EMP sort cell attack against a target of some sort, whether it's a government target or a civilian target, at what point does the network engineer start saying, this is not an IP problem, this is an EMC problem? At what point in the thing, and then how do you find it? Oh shit, that's a whole mess of new equipment with some new expertise. And nobody's, I mean, how many people, the EW world's going to have some defenses, but who else? Not in the civilian sector.
I can't, no, nothing comes to mind. Just having out-of-the-box solution for this.
Frequency hopping?
Sorry?
Frequency hopping? Is this, I mean, when you're blasting...
When you're covering the entire
Are
spectrum,
you covering the entire spectrum?
after the talk I can show you some sample data from a live capture for the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, what it looks like current state, and what it looks like after one of these noise generators has been activated.
And that data was discovered.
Triangulate
The data that I captured?
You captured it personally?
Yeah, the data that I captured. Let's call it in a country without extradition treaty to the U.S. that allows testing of wireless equipment. Let's call it that. Yeah. I did a small low-power test, captured sample data, and compared the two. I can show you after. Yeah, I can show you after the talk. Yeah, the one point that I wanted to cover with this is that there are so many widespread applications for cheap-ass, off-the-shelf hardware, and we could go into so many other different fields of attack and terrible ideas I have for them. There's no unifying defense against it. We have to start thinking way far out of the box than we currently are as a potential attacker, or to defend against potential attackers. We also have to look, and it's not just policy. We can't deal with just regulations. We also have to change the way that we think. We really do. Otherwise, it's going to take someone that's a little bit more pissed off and cynical than I am to go start throwing these around wherever and doing whatever with them. That's exactly. Let's have a chat about it. I'll be posting the slide up on.
Install them in movie theaters.
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite hypothetical applications is you have all the people talking on phones in a movie theater. The super low power ones have an effective range of about 30 to 50 feet. Kick one off, no one can answer or respond to text messages, and you get to watch a movie.
And that would have saved that guy's life in Texas.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That was Florida.
That was Florida,
Florida.
yeah.
Same
Yep.
difference.
No, it's not. It's like a TV. No, it's not.
I know.
What was that?
That's some stories.
Okay, so what's that URL?
Jake, sorry.
Jake.
It'll be up on GitHub. Whack bad ideas. Whack on a budget. Bad ideas is the main source, so I'll be throwing up the slides here in a bit and a whole bunch of additional notes and information I
We can
have.
show that after the next little demo. Come up afterwards.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I guess you.
There's
encouraging
also.
us to fork and contribute?
Sorry?
Encouraging us to fork and contribute?
If you want to share bad ideas, that's the only way that we're going to get this working is having these talks about it. So the notes and links will also be here. There's also a bunch of cited instances from last year, news stories. The San Jose gunshot causes oil spill that caused one of their smaller perverts to pop. That attack in San Francisco, yada yada yada. But for now,
It's not fun because
that's
you
my
can
talk.
have it all anyway.
Thank you so much, you guys. Appreciate it.